State of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse.
The jury in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial has reached a verdict. These are live pictures from the courtroom in Kenosha. Let's listen in.
Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the second count of the information, Richard McGinnis, we the jury find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the third count of the information, unknown male, we the jury find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the fourth count of the information, Anthony Huber, we the jury find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the fifth count of the information, Gage Grosskreutz, we the jury find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty.
Members of the jury, are these your unanimous verdicts? Is there anyone who does not agree with the verdicts as read? Would you wish the jury polled?
No.
Okay. Okay, folks, your job is done, and we started just about 3 weeks ago. And I told you it could last 2 weeks and 2 days. This is 2 weeks. This is 3 weeks. You were a wonderful jury to work with. You were punctual. You were attentive. And the forgotten six over here who had a very difficult job of keeping from discussing the case during the time that they were sequestered as well. All of you, I couldn't have asked for a better jury to work with. And it has truly been my pleasure. I think, without commenting on the verdicts themselves, just in terms of your the attentiveness and the cooperation that you gave to us, justifies the confidence that the founders of our country placed in you. So I dismiss you at this time. You're never under any obligation to discuss any aspect of this case with anyone. You're welcome to do so as little or as much as you want. The media have requested, a number of media sources have requested the ability to talk to you, and they have been allowed to present presentations to you that you'll get in writing, and it's entirely up to you whether you want to contact them. They are not to contact you. If anyone does contact you and just tell them you're not interested in discussing it, if that's the case, and if anyone persists in doing so, report that to us and it will be addressed, I assure you. At the beginning of the trial, there was some concern about information and your safety, and I assure you that we will take every measure to ensure that that is your concerns are addressed and respected. I'm going to talk to you for just a minute, not about anything to do with the case, but just about that sole issue. And you, as I say, you're welcome to discuss the case as little or as much as you want. Any questions, anybody? Thank you so much. And you're after 4 years, you're eligible for service again. It would be my pleasure to work with you. Thank you. Yeah, please. Or in the they can attend in the library. It's not going to be more than a minute, or maybe it will be.
Well,
yeah, take them upstairs. That's fine. That's fine.
Breaking news at this hour, 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse has been found not guilty on all charges against him for the murder of two men in Kenosha last summer during protests in that city. Again, Kyle Rittenhouse, 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, found not guilty of all the charges filed against him.
Mr. Richards?
Your Honor, I have the verdict.
Any word from the state?
The jury has their community in this trial and has spoken.
All right, the motion of the defendant is granted. The charges against the defendant on all counts are dismissed with prejudice, and he is released from the obligation of his bond. Anything else?
No, carry on.
Thank you. Good day.
I just sent an email from the bond.
A trial lasting just about 3 weeks, the jury deliberating for more than 25 hours over 4 days, finding 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty of all charges against him. He is now a free man after the jury's decision. This is a live look outside the courtroom where the crowd that has been gathering there for days and days. A lot of media on hand, and we're just getting to them now on this verdict of Rittenhouse not guilty. People from both sides of the aisle protesting, or not protesting, but holding vigil, and there was some tempers and flaring from time to time. But as of right now, people seem to be absorbing the information. Rittenhouse, of course, was charged with first-degree reckless homicide for the shooting death of Joseph Rosenbaum of Kenosha, first-degree intentional homicide for the shooting death of Anthony Huber of Silver Lake, and attempted first-degree intentional homicide for shooting and injuring Gage Grosskreutz of Milwaukee. He was also charged with 2 counts of recklessly endangering safety, one for shooting at an unidentified man the defense has been referring to as Jump Kick Man, and another for shooting in the direction of journalist Ricky McGinnis of the Daily Caller News when he shot Rosenbaum. A charge of possession of a dangerous weapon by a minor was dismissed by Kenosha County Judge Bruce Schrader on Monday. Again, Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty on all of those charges after the jury deliberating for more than 25 hours. We'll take a quick break and get more reaction on this breaking news right after this.
This is a News 3 Now special report.
Thanks for staying with us. We are continuing our coverage of the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, not guilty on all charges. Joining me now, Susan Simon. This came rather quickly.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I mean, for today, it's been 25 hours of deliberation plus. But
over 4 days, right.
We expected if there was going to be a verdict, perhaps later this afternoon.
That's right. No, I think that caught everybody's surprise. Usually there's a little bit of lag time in between the jury announcing that they've reached a verdict and the reading of the verdict, but the judge read the verdict right away, not guilty on all accounts. 18-year-old
Kyle Rittenhouse is a free man. Let's take a look outside the...
Eats and sleeps the rhetoric of Proud Boys and Ku Klux Klan and skinheads talk about hurting African Americans and minorities all the time. He merely acted it out. And what came to his rescue? This racist-ass government, the police, and everything that was involved in this case that did not ringtones playing from Trump. The judge saying he doesn't like ralliers, he calls them rioters. There's a big difference. So this was not a true, accurate carry of justice, and it led to this young man getting away because of it.
Don't get up, man. Stay down.
They didn't identify this. He said Reverend. I don't know who that is. I need to find that.
Get out. For the mic's not going in and out. It's not easy.
The right to self-defense survived this court and survived the pressure.
I don't know how much that actually got to choose.
Yeah.
Joining us now on the phone with reaction to all of this. Chris, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. What would you like me to talk about? I wonder.
What is your reaction?
What's your reaction to all this?
My reaction is that I saw this coming with the jury's work for 16 hours or so without asking a question. I think this was a case that was always difficult for the state. I think they charged more than they should have. There's no question they blundered almost at every turn. The defense did a workmanlike job. In a case this big with this much evidence, it's hard to corral it all, but they did a fine job getting the big points out well. And because the case was so tipped against the state, because it was 50-50 self-defense or not, that's a bad place for the state to start. And what happened over the last day and a half, what made people impatient, was not a word out of the jury other than they had Subway for lunch. So as a practical matter, they were clearly at a certain number, maybe it was 8-4, 9-3, and they just spent time working through with each of the jurors who were holding out for something else, all of the questions they had and all of the answers. And they never needed to ask the judge for help, which meant they were confident. And I suspect that maybe one of the people who took the law home was a holdout, and they said, why don't you sleep on it, read it over, and then come back tomorrow and let's start again. So of the jury, even though a lot of things that happened in the courtroom didn't seem so fair. So I hope that gives you a snapshot of my view.
Well, the judge allowed sort of layers of lesser, for the jury to deliberate and consider lesser charges, sort of layers of lesser charges than the double homicide and the alleged attempted homicide. Do you think that confused the jury in any way?
No, they never got to it. They never got to it. And here's why. If they determined that the state had not disproven self-defense, they didn't go on to the lesser charges. Self-defense was the end of each victim, alleged victim's crime. And so if you recall, well, you won't recall, I do because I'm a lawyer, there was a lot of confounding jury discussions and jury instruction discussions, but I'll say this. The judge realized that it had to say that if they found that the state had not disproved that he acted with the privilege of self-defense, they were not to go on to the lesser charges. That was the case. That was the issue in the case from the day he was charged, and it remained the issue for the jury. I'm almost certain they never got to any lesser charges.
There were 2 mistrial motions filed, and those go away now? The judge has not ruled on those.
They are moot. The verdict renders them moot because jeopardy has attached when the judge enters judgment on the verdict on the motion of the defense. The defense doesn't need its motions decided for mistrial. A mistrial is saying we didn't get a fair trial. I don't think you're going to hear that from anybody on the defense side this year, so I don't think you need to worry.
So you think the state overcharged on this?
I do. They overcharged in 2 ways. First, they knew there was going to be a lot of video, but because of the milieu in which the crime occurred shortly after the Jacob Blake shooting, there was a very great rush to charge. There's no question that was true. And instead, since there's no statute of limitations on first-degree intentional homicide, and there's long ones on the other counts, they could have waited, reviewed all the evidence, and come to a better decision. I think in every one of these shootings, they could have brought a criminal charge, but I don't know that any of them would have been premeditated, or not premeditated, I'm sorry, intentional first-degree homicide. But, you know, politics being what it is, and the district attorney is elected, sometimes they have to act in what they consider to be the best interest of the community. And I have no doubt in my mind that the charge was brought quickly in order to make sure that worse disturbances on the street did not ensue. Now, what happens tonight? Well, I hope people stay calm and realize our system works.
Yeah, the whole issue surrounding the trial was provocation versus self-defense. The jury clearly agreed that it was self-defense. Does it surprise you that that all of the charges, it was a unanimous decision, not guilty on all of the charges, that there were no repercussions at all for the loss of a life?
Okay, let's stop right there. There are massive repercussions. Do you remember?
I mean, you know what I'm saying.
Rittenhouse on the stand?
Yeah.
There are no legal consequences in the criminal court. Don't forget, O.J. was sued for millions, okay? Right. Somebody can sue him if they want. This was nothing more and nothing less than a finding that the state had find him innocent. Let's remember that. They said the state had failed to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, you mentioned provocation. Let me just tell you something about that. It's crystal clear in this case that the provocation, in my view, was a Hail Mary, or even worse, an onside kick, because the state had nothing to really counter the video evidence and the testimony of eyewitnesses. So what they did was they tried to use a technicality and come up with this idea that walking on the street with an AR was provocation. Here's the problem. There were people doing it today. and nobody got arrested for any kind of disorderly conduct. It is your right to carry openly in Wisconsin. So that was really a last gasp jury instruction. My guess is the prosecutor was thrilled to get it, and maybe that's why they had 3 days of deliberations, but I don't think he truly believed he was going to win on that issue.
If you were the state, how would you have presented this case differently?
How would I present it differently?
What kind of charges would you?
Since I was a prosecutor, let me put it this way. I would have taken the time to investigate it properly. I would not have charged him right away. Where was he going to go? Home to mom. This isn't an international financier like the infamous Mark Rich, who was pardoned by President Clinton, who could run to a foreign country and hide. He lived in Kenosha and Racine, and that's where he was going to be. And when they told him to come to court, he was going to come to court. They should not rush in on a case this serious if they want to do it right. You don't have to. When I was a state prosecutor, we took our time on homicide investigations because you could bring them whenever. You know that. You read about cold cases every day for 30 years.
Okay, I think we lost our.
Do it that way.
We're losing your connection there, Chris.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Let me take it off speaker. Maybe it'll work better.
We can hear you now.
We're looking, Chris.
Okay.
We're
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we've got
Great.
you. We're looking at a live picture outside of the Kenosha County Courthouse.
Yes.
All appears to be calm right now, at least from the picture, the vantage point that we're looking at. But this is a case it was a very polarizing case that sort of magnified political agendas on both sides, on the left and on the right. What do you expect to happen from this point forward now?
Well, first of all, nothing further will happen in this case because it's over. If you're asking me for, if you will, a societal overview, all I'm going to tell you is I'm going to say a prayer that people realize that all of the violence that could ensue will not advance anyone's agenda, but will continue to drive this country further apart. And let's remember that people did lose their lives here. And as a result, we have to honor them. Those lives had value. And we should not, therefore, use the old biblical analogy of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, because that's not our system of justice, and it's not the Bible's either, by the way. It's just a famous line. I think what everybody has to remember is that if their son or daughter or brother or husband or father found themselves in the same situation, you would want them to have every right and every opportunity at a fair trial this way. If you didn't get it, you would feel as if you were railroaded.
Chris, thanks for being with us today, for your insights, and let's all hope for a peaceful night in Kenosha this evening. Chris Van Weer.
Let's all say a prayer for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And everybody should, you bet. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Jessa Nicholson has been with us all along this trial. She's joining us now live. Jessa, your reaction?
Well, I was surprised they were back today. Going to go into next week. But, you know, this is something that people that watched the evidence portion of the trial were kind of predicting. I think the last few days we've gotten away from that was the general public sentiment about this prior to deliberations because the jury's been out for so long. But I can't say I'm entirely surprised.
But having listened to all of the testimony in the entire case, do you think the jury reached the right decision?
I think the jury reached a reasonable decision. And to me, I don't see this case as having been as clear-cut as either side argued it. I think that the prosecution made Kyle Rittenhouse out to be a very cold-blooded and deliberate murderer. I think the defense made him out to be a bit of a folk hero. I think that he was a kid in a really dangerous situation who took steps to act in his own defense. I don't think he's a hero. He didn't save other people. At most, he saved himself. I think the issue here is the jury couldn't say beyond a reasonable doubt that self-defense wasn't an issue. And I know I'm using double negatives there, but that's really what we're talking about. This verdict represents the jury saying the state didn't disprove self-defense. That's different than a verdict of absolute innocence, I think. I mean, there's no such thing as a verdict of absolute innocence, right. But what the verdict says is simply that the prosecution was not able to overcome that very high burden.
Some some critics are saying that the state may have overcharged in this case. What do you think?
I think that the count relating to Mr. Huber was overcharged. I think that could have been charged out as a second-degree intentional homicide, but of course the jury was given lesser included offenses and they rejected those.
Do you think they even got an opportunity to consider those? I guess there's no way to know that for sure, is there?
Well, so the way that they're instructed to work, right, is they're supposed to start with the top count, and if they can't agree on the top count that the defendant is guilty, or if they agree that he is not guilty, then they have to kind of run down and look at it. And so I assume that they talked about all of it, particularly given the length of time that they were out. I assume that they did work through it, and they probably just got to the point where nobody was ever going to reach 12 of them agreeing for guilt on any of the counts. So I bet they looked at all of the counts. They would have been trying to work through those instructions. It wouldn't have stopped just with we don't think he's guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, so we're going to come back full acquittal. They would have done the analysis on everything.
It seemed to come very quickly this morning, that the verdict coming down. The people, you included, thought it might come a little later on.
Yeah, I was expecting it next week. And I did start seeing kind of rumors on the internet, which, put as much faith in that as you want to, saying that the jury intended to come back around 10 a.m. I'm not sure where people were getting that, but I discounted those as well. I thought we were going to I thought they were going to bring them back Saturday. Well, so I'm a little surprised it came back this early today.
You were very articulate yesterday talking about how everybody's trying to read the tea leaves and figure out when a verdict would be reached. But in your experience trying cases, does the jury normally come back with a verdict and the judge reads it right away? Or is there a little bit of time to digest that before the verdict is read? Because I think it caught all of us a little bit off guard today.
So I will tell you, as a lawyer who sits and waits for it, in my head, I always kind of refer to it as like this death march of the jury hands, the jury foreperson hands the verdict.
Did we lose Jessa?
I think we lost Jessa.
Hannah, did we lose Jessa? Oh, there she is.
Okay, you're back.
Sorry
Jess.
about
Sorry.
that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying that when you're one of the lawyers waiting, that walk from the jury foreperson to the judge by the bailiff takes about 7 days. I mean, it takes forever. But in reality, it only takes a few minutes, and that is very common that they do that walk from the foreperson to the bailiff to the judge, and then we read it right away.
Mr. Rittenhouse had quite a reaction when the verdict was read. Seemed to break down again. How do you think the rest of the community is going to react?
I am hopeful that everything remains calm. This is a case that was very divisive. I think everyone is expecting that there are going to be a lot of people who react negatively. I think that would have been true regardless of which way this went. So I expect there will be protests. I hope there isn't violence, but I expect there will probably be public outrage.
What ripple effect, if any, do you think this verdict is going to have on future cases?
I think that some of the optics of this trial might cause people to be more careful with some of their off-the-cuff comments that occur when a trial's being live streamed. I think this judge got a lot of media critique for things that he said in passing or that he did not necessarily in front of the jury. So I can see judges, when they have high-profile cases like this, trying to make sure that they're not making those errant comments more. My hope would be that the prosecution would take a look at this verdict and look at some of their conduct throughout the trial and self-reflect and see if they could make different choices about the way that they approach evidence.
We talked earlier about the fact that the defense had filed several motions for a mistrial in this case, and the judge never ruled. Do you think he was waiting for the jury to come back with a verdict? Because now, at this point, that's moot, right?
Well, he said that explicitly yesterday. He said, I will not rule on these unless there is a guilty verdict, and then I'll make a ruling.
Interesting.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
All right.
I continue to believe that was not in the public safety interest, but it doesn't matter. It's a moot point at this point.
All right, Jessa, thank you very much for all of your work throughout this week. It's been a pleasure, and once again, Kyle Rittenhouse, 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, found not guilty on all charges filed against him. After 25 or so hours of jury deliberation and 3 weeks of trial, Kyle Rittenhouse, not guilty. That's our time for now. We have continuing coverage all day long on channel3000.com and on our Channel 3000 app, and a complete wrap-up coming up on Live at 4. In the meantime, have a great afternoon.